On the morning of February 19th, 2026, a group of 10 boaters stood on the bank of the Colorado River, watching the last raft of their trip start its run through one of the most technical rapids in the Grand Canyon. They had scouted it the night before. They had scouted it again that morning. The man rowing that last raft had done this trip before. He had grown up with oars in his hands. Minutes later, his boat came through the rapid empty. Nobody had seen him fall. Aaron Benjamin was 30 years old, from Post Falls, Idaho. By every account from the people who knew him, the river wasn't a hobby he picked up. It was something closer to his native language. His mother, Patricia Benjamin, remembers him as a small child asking to go to the river just to throw rocks. By his early teens, he could row a cataract the family nicknamed the Pig through rapids on the Clark Fork River. As he grew older, he ran rivers all over the American West: the Salmon, the Selway, the Owehee, the John Day, and more. His family had joined the Northwest River Association after settling in North Idaho, and through it, Aaron grew up surrounded by whitewater boaters who became, in the words of one family friend, lifelong family. Paul Delaney, one of the club's founders, remembered meeting Aaron as a kid tagging along on his parents' river trips. He absolutely lived for his white water, Delaney said. Bart Rainiak, another longtime friend, met Aaron when he was 7 or 8 years old on a trip down the Teton River and spent more river trips with the Benjamin family over the following years than he could count. He remembered nights on the beach at the end of long trips where Aaron would juggle torches around the campfire. Aaron worked for the city of Post Falls in its water reclamation division. Outside of work, he skied, biked, and rafted. Friends remembered him as a strong boater, a capable Dutch oven cook, and, as one put it, a kind, gentle giant of a man. This was his second trip rowing the Grand Canyon in as many years. He knew the river. He had run it before. His parents had done the Grand Canyon multiple times themselves. This was, by every measure available, an experienced boater on familiar water. The expedition launched on February 9th, 2026, a private, non-commercial river trip, meaning the group had organized and permitted the journey themselves rather than through a guided outfitter. 10 people, multiple rafts and kayaks, a multi-day expedition down one of the most demanding whitewater rivers in North America, through a canyon that offers no easy way out once you commit to the water. Private Grand Canyon river trips like this one are a serious undertaking, even for experienced groups. Permits are difficult to obtain, so difficult that access is typically awarded through an annual lottery, and once a group is on the water, they are largely self-sufficient for the length of the trip, managing their own logistics, safety, and decision-making with limited ability to get outside help quickly if something goes wrong. For 10 days, the group made their way down the Colorado River through the heart of the Grand Canyon, and on the 10th day, they reached Mile 77. Hance Rapid sits at Colorado River Mile 77, and among river runners, it carries a specific reputation. It is one of the longest and most technical rapids in the entire canyon system. It is notably rocky, enough so that experienced boaters describe it in blunt terms. If you fall out here, you are going to hit rocks on your way down. One of its defining features sits right at the top, a large hole. In river terminology, a hole forms when water flows over a submerged rock or ledge and curls back on itself, creating a recirculating, churning feature that can trap and hold anything caught inside it, a person, a paddle, even an entire raft, in place, cycling it back into the same violent water again and again, rather than letting the current carry it downstream. Hance had killed before. In 2022, a 68-year-old boater named Mary Kelly had drowned at the same rapid. The group had not treated Hance casually. They scouted the rapid the evening before running it, then scouted it again the following morning before anyone put a boat on the water. Standard, careful practice for a technical rapid like this one. But as one member of the group would later put it, conditions in a river can change quickly, even between a scout and a run. When the group began running Hance Rapid, the difficulty of the hole at the top became apparent almost immediately. Three other members of the party were thrown from their boats in that same spot near the top of the rapid. All three were able to swim clear and reach safety, a testament to how quickly a hole like this one could take a boater by surprise, and also to how survivable it could be if you came free of your boat and could swim. Among those three was Alan DeKalb, 67, a member of the group with 3 decades of experience as a paramedic. DeKalb capsized his kayak in the hole, was pulled underwater, and swam clear of his own boat. The current eventually released him, spitting him out downstream, where he was able to reach an eddy, a pocket of calmer water along the bank, climb back into his kayak, and paddle the rest of the way down under his own power. Aaron Benjamin was rowing the sweep position that morning, the last boat in the group's run through the rapid, a role typically given to a strong, trusted boater who follows behind everyone else, partly so that if someone ahead gets into trouble, there's still a capable set of hands and eyes coming through behind them. He was alone in an 18-foot raft, working the oars by himself. By the time Aaron entered the top of the rapid, DeKalb and the others who had capsized were already downstream, dealing with their own recoveries. The rest of the group had already made it through and were watching from below, the way boaters do, keeping an eye on each other's runs. They watched Aaron's raft go into the hole. Nobody saw him go over the side. There was no single visible moment where he was in the boat and then wasn't. What the group saw, as DeKalb described it afterward, was Aaron sitting in the boat and then the boat stuck in the hole, and then at some point in between, he simply was not in it anymore. Nobody actually saw him go over, DeKalb said afterward. He was seen sitting in the boat, then the boat was seen stuck up there, and he wasn't in it anymore. The raft remained caught in the hole, empty, cycling in the churn at the top of the rapid. The working theory, based on what the group could piece together, was that Aaron had gone into the water and become trapped underneath his own raft, held down by the boat itself while the hydraulic force of the hole kept both him and the raft recirculating in place, rather than allowing the current to carry either of them downstream to where the water calms and a swimmer can surface and breathe. In normal river current, even fast and rough water, the flow moves in one direction, downstream. A swimmer who falls out of a boat in ordinary rapids can typically orient themselves, get their feet downstream to fend off rocks, and work their way toward the surface and eventually to the bank, because the current is, at its core, moving them somewhere. A hole breaks that rule entirely. The recirculating action means the surface water at a hole is actually flowing backward, upstream, back into the base of the wave, before diving underwater and cycling through again. A person caught in a strong hole isn't being carried away from the danger. They are being held inside it, sometimes pulled down, pushed along the riverbed, then recirculated back up into the same violent aeration, over and over. Add a raft into that same recirculating water, and the danger compounds. An 18-foot raft is heavy and displaces enormous volume. If a swimmer ends up underneath it while both are caught in the same hole, the raft itself becomes an obstacle between the swimmer and the surface, something solid to be pinned against or a barrier preventing a clear path up for air, all while the surrounding water is aerated and turbulent enough that even open water at the surface can be difficult to breathe from. This is the scenario the group believed happened to Aaron, pulled from his raft into the hole and then held under it, unable to reach clear air for a length of time that a human body cannot survive without oxygen. Drowning is often misunderstood as a violent, thrashing event. In reality, especially in cases like this, it is often closer to the opposite, a rapid, largely silent physiological cascade. When a person is submerged and unable to reach air, the body's first response is an involuntary breath-holding reflex. This buys some time, but as carbon dioxide builds in the bloodstream, the drive to breathe becomes overwhelming, a reflex that in most circumstances cannot be voluntarily suppressed for long. If the person is still submerged when that reflex takes over, water enters the airway. At that point, most people experience laryngospasm, an involuntary clenching of the vocal cords that blocks water from entering the lungs directly, but also blocks air. This can hold for a short period, but as the body's oxygen reserves continue to fall and carbon dioxide continues to rise, the person loses consciousness. Once unconsciousness sets in, the laryngospasm typically releases and water enters the lungs. Without oxygen, brain cells begin to suffer irreversible damage within roughly 4 to 6 minutes. The heart, deprived of oxygen, moves toward cardiac arrest. The entire process, from initial submersion to the point where meaningful recovery becomes unlikely, typically unfolds within a handful of minutes, which is precisely why the survivability of a drowning incident depends so heavily on how quickly a person is recovered from the water and how quickly resuscitation begins. The moment the group realized Aaron's raft was empty, they moved. They recovered him from the water and pulled him onto the shore. He was unresponsive. What happened next is, by any measure, about as capable a response as could have existed on a remote stretch of river, hours from the nearest road. DeCab, the same man who had just been thrown from his own kayak in the same hole minutes earlier, brought 30 years of experience as a working paramedic to the riverbank. Another member of the 10-person group was a veteran trauma nurse. They began CPR immediately and followed advanced cardiovascular life support protocols, ACLS, the same structured emergency cardiac care framework used in hospitals and ambulances, encompassing chest compressions, airway management, and the kind of systematic, practiced intervention that most bystanders, however well-meaning, would not be equipped to perform correctly under pressure. You couldn't have asked for a better group to do the resuscitation, DeKalb said afterward. They worked on him for roughly 20 minutes. At 11:15 that morning, the group sent an emergency alert to Grand Canyon National Park. The Grand Canyon Regional Communications Center received word that CPR was already in progress. Park rangers were dispatched by helicopter to the coordinates at River Mile 77, one of the only ways to reach a group in that section of the canyon quickly, given the terrain and the distance from any road. Despite the CPR, the ACLS protocols, and the arrival of park rangers by air, all resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. Aaron Benjamin was pronounced dead at the scene. The National Park Service and the Coconino County Medical Examiner opened an investigation into the incident, standard procedure for any fatality of this kind within the park. Aaron's mother, Patricia, later said she still didn't know exactly what happened to her son beyond the broad outline, that he had fallen out of his boat and had no evidence of trauma on his body, meaning he had not struck his head or been injured against a rock on the way down. She was told that river conditions in the canyon can be unpredictable, and that something as small as an oar catching the wrong way could be enough to catapult a rower out of a raft. She learned of her son's death when a post-falls police officer arrived at her door, just hours after it happened, followed shortly afterward by a call from the National Park Service. The next day, she and her husband flew to Phoenix, rented a car, and drove to Flagstaff. Aaron was cremated. His family said they planned to spread his ashes in some of the places he loved, rather than a single burial site, a choice his mother felt he would have wanted. Aaron Benjamin had been rowing rivers since before he could walk. He knew this canyon. He had studied this rapid the night before and again that same morning. He was, by the account of everyone who watched him work an oar over the better part of 3 decades, exactly the kind of boater you would want in the last seat of a 10-person trip. None of that changed what the river did that Thursday morning at mile 77. His friends remember a man who juggled torches on river beaches at the end of long trips, who cooked a mean Dutch oven meal, who friends described simply as a kind, gentle giant. His mother remembers a boy who once asked to go to the river just to throw rocks, long before he ever picked up an oar of his own. The Grand Canyon has been carrying boaters through Hance Rapid for as long as people have run this river, and it will keep doing exactly what it has always done, rewarding preparation most of the time and reminding everyone, occasionally, that a lifetime on the water is not the same thing as a guarantee.